Hi everyone, Kaun here. In my channel, I usually don't talk about international relations and politics, two fields that I'm still learning about. Because first, I did not major in either of these fields. Secondly, what we learned at our middle school, high school, and even college is mostly about Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, communism, and socialism in general. Never really learned about other alternatives of society systematically. For example, we weren't taught what is left-right political spectrum, what is freedom of expression and why, or what is democracy and why in a systematic way. There were a couple of history textbooks mentioned these terms when it comes to history of the Republic of China, but did not really teach what they are. We just memorized them for exams. However, in the last 6 to 7 years, I gradually learned about them and understand why they're important. One of the reasons why they're important is because they impact our day-to-day life and our society as a whole, probably more than the iPhone, the TikTok, the internet combined. That's the reason why I'd like to talk about it today in this video. No one can really ignore what's going on in Ukraine right now. I still can't imagine that this war is happening. And people in the country had to stop their daily activity, had to stop going to work, and had to stop learning at school and prepare for the war. Now they're fighting in the war. As of today, already more than 2 million refugees has fled the country to Poland alone, and the estimated number of refugees will grow to 5 to 7 million. We feel really sorry for the people who are affected by the war, especially those in Ukraine. So we donated some money to Canadian Red Cross in order to provide humanitarian support for the people who are affected by this war. If you are like us thinking about donating and helping these people, please reach out to these organizations and find out what you can do. I myself is definitely against war, any war, no matter how that is initiated, because people die and buildings and roads will be blown into pieces during a war, and huge financial losses would incur. It's just a waste of resources that can be used to do good things instead of killing each other. It looks like as a human we never learn from our history, and we always come up with many excuses to go to war against each other. Today a country goes to war with its neighbor to stop him from joining a cold boy band. Tomorrow, who knows, they may go to war accusing each other of stealing one's socks or something. Only those countries and people who really don't respect lives and human rights can ignore these terrible things caused by war. I've seen some people talking about all these conflicts reported by the Western mainstream media are misinformation and even disinformation. Oh, by the way, do you know the difference between misinformation and disinformation? Misinformation is false or incorrect information presented as fact, either intentionally or unintentionally, whereas disinformation is a subset of misinformation that is deliberately deceptive. In other words, misinformation is false information on purpose or not, whereas disinformation is false information clearly on purpose to deceive the audience. Anyway, so for those people who don't really trust the mainstream media's reports and believing that they're false or misleading, they themselves can verify or make an educated guess without going to the front lines in Ukraine. For example, if you have Ukrainian friends who you can trust and who have relatives in Ukraine, you can ask them what's going on in Ukraine. Or you can ask your Polish friends whether their country has been getting lots of refugees from neighboring Ukraine. Or you can go to Ukraine and figure it out yourself if you have time and resource to do so. I trust media in the free world more than those in authoritarian countries. In the free world, you can believe in whatever you want and you don't have to trust the authorities. You can speak out against them. But in an authoritarian government, saying anything against the government is endangering your safety. The government can literally ban you from the internet and can even put you in a jail. It's not a joke. I have some friends from those authoritarian governments and they're afraid to speak against their governments. We should be glad that we are living in a free world. Recently, you might have heard that since the start of this war, Putin and his government has banned Instagram. Before that, he signed a law banning fake news, insulting the state. When those international businesses closed their Russian branches, Putin ordered the government to buy them. That made the country even more centralized authoritarianism. I'm no expert in politics or international relations, but I know that killing people is wrong. is just wrong. Killing civilians is even worse. No matter what your religions and beliefs are, it's just wrong. Certainly, this war has made Russia the most sanctioned country in the world right now. Not only are many countries putting sanctions on Russia, but also many major international companies are pulling out of the country or halting their businesses in it. The total amount of sanctions put on Russia is obviously much higher and heavier than when it took Crimea and invaded Donetsk and Luhansk. Perhaps it's going to be a turning point for Russia. Obviously, Russian economy is heavily dependent on natural gas and oil. And of course, Europe is buying a lot of them, besides China. And Russian GDP is closely related to oil price. If this round of sanctions is keep going, and if Russian economy is keep getting worse, we probably can reach a point where ordinary Russians can no longer stand with it. Then their internal conflict within the country between the government and people will become severe and severe. And it will be a disaster for the country, especially for the people. If you look at history of Russia or histories of other communist country or former communist country, and a lot of them are having hard time or had hard time when transforming into democratic states where people have more freedom. I think that's partially because these countries were or still are ruled by a dominant political party of communism without a competitive, comparable opposition party, and partially because communist culture still exists there. I think that's exactly the case in Russia, especially since Putin became the president back in 2000. From being a weakly institutionalized, fragile, and in many ways distorted pro-democracy in 1990s. Russia under Putin has moved back into the direction of highly centralized authoritarianism, which has characterized the state for its more than 1,000 years of history. Given the experience of 1990s and the Kremlin's propaganda, emphasizing this period as one of the chaos, economic collapse, and international humiliation. Wait. Where else did you hear about international humiliation? The Russian people has no great enthusiasm for democracy and remain politically apathetic in the light of extraordinary economic recovery and improvement of lifestyle for so many in the past more than 20 years. If that extraordinary economic recovery and improvement in lifestyle, which are both dependent on oil price increase, turned into economic collapse and lifestyle deterioration due to prolonged and heavy sanctions of international effort, what would the people in Russia think about their government? Perhaps it would be the 16th decisive war in human history, considering what other communist countries would do if Russia becomes a completely democratic country and no longer authoritarian. That's why I think that this war probably is a turning point for Russia and its future, considering the heavy sanctions put on it by the Western allies. That's the end of my video. Again, if you're thinking about donating and helping those people affected by war in Ukraine, please reach out to Red Cross or other similar organizations and see what you can do. Thanks for watching. That made the country even more centralized authoritarianism.